Okay, so this is going to be a quick intro to the basics of 3D Max for anyone that has not used it before but are interested in learning it. So whenever you open 3D Max, you get this little window. This will more or less have recent files, so on and so forth. I don't really use it, so I just close it out. Next, you're going to have your workspace looking like this. On the left here is the layer manager. You can have it conserved in here on the left, or if you want more real estate to work with, you could just move it out and close it out if you want to. What I personally like to do is I like to right click up here, click on layers, put my layer manager up here in the tab so that way it just hangs out. So next thing is you have your workflow, your windows, you have your front, like so on and so forth, like any other 3D engine or any 3D software. Now to open Material Editor, there's two options. You can either go up here, click on this button to open Material Editor, or the shortcut for it is M, as in Michael. Now that you have it open, the default is the node-based setup, so you can drag your materials, blends, so on and so forth. I personally am not a fan of nodes. I learned 3D Max without nodes, so I never adapted to this workflow. So to switch it, you just go to Modes, and click on Compact. This switches it to the sphere, so if you like this, you can use the spheres. If you prefer the nodes, you could leave it as is. The next thing is switching render engines. Pressing F10 opens up this menu right here. Now all you have to do is for target, this is where this is for interactive, I believe. So you can leave it as is if you're using Corona. So for me, for render, I'm switching it to Corona. And then what I do like to do is, because this is my personal window that I like to use all the time, I like to lock this window to always be my render window. So here where it says view to render, there's a little icon for a lock. Just click it, and now no matter what window you render from, it'll always render the perspective view. So that's a nice thing to have. So that's that. The next thing, to configure your own shortcuts in 3D Studio Max, you go to customize user interface, and this is where you would do, you can modify your shortcuts for the keyboard, your toolbars, your quads, so on and so forth. So for instance, if you want to add something into here, this is where you would do it. Right here through tools. Now quads, if I remember, this is the right click, so like move, rotate, scale, this is all this, so you can add more buttons to this setup. So that's what gets done here. Now let's see what else. Preferences. This is just your basic backup files. So what I like to do is, this gets very annoying, especially working with CAD data, because it takes a while to save. So for backup intervals, instead of 5 minutes, I make it 60 minutes. So every hour it'll back up my file. Everything else I leave as is, but this is something I do change. Now the next thing is every viewport. Now this is very annoying with the new 3D Maxes, is they do these stupid shaded things. So as you can see, well, one thing, it highlights the objects and then it gives you shadows. So both of these things I dislike. So first you want to click on realistic, change it to shaded. This is if you don't like it. I personally don't like it. It's very distracting when prepping the models. So there we go. Now all of these are normal. And then under customize preferences, there is an option here to turn off the wireframe around the mesh. I just gotta find it real quick. So here we go. It is under customize, or under preferences, and then under viewport. Originally this is checked, so when you have it checked, it does the annoying thing. So if you go to preferences, viewports, and then you uncheck it, now it will not highlight. This is just my personal workflow. You could leave it as is, you could turn it off, whatever you prefer. Okay, so there's that. Another thing, so let's say we convert this. So in 3D Max, this is also for people that don't know anything about 3D Max, so I apologize, this is a waste of time for some. If you right click on an object, you convert it to editable mesh, editable poly. Typically if it's CAD data, you always leave it at edit mesh. Convert to editable poly will break the smoothing groups, but what I like to do is, as long as it's not a CAD model, Edit Poly is the way to go. It has a lot more tools than Edit Mesh. Edit Mesh is like from the 90s. Edit Poly is like revolutionized all the cool tools. It's great for modeling. So you convert to Edit Poly. Now you have your vertices, your edges, your border, your polygon, and your element. Now you could find all these online of what they are. I'm not going to go over that. But here's the thing that I do want to show. So typically these selection modes are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now if you see, if I press 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, they switch. Now if yours don't switch, is this little guy, keyboard shortcut toggle override. Sometimes this actually will prevent it from switching. So I always unmark that one. So that's that. The next thing, let's say you rotate your mesh like so, and you want to rotate it around, but you want to do it in the axes that the mesh is in. Up here, change it from U to local. So now you could continue rotating it on saved memory. Now what you can do is change it back to view, and see down here they have these things. If you right click and switch it back to 0, you can reset it all back to 0, 0, 0. Now there will be times, and I don't know why, but sometimes these numbers will not be able to return it to 0. It'll just start rotating in goofy ways. That's when you're just screwed. Simple as that. Another thing what you do want to keep in mind, and this will happen when you work with elements that are scaling up or down. So let's say I scale this up right here. This cube, it still thinks it's 1 by 1 by 1. It doesn't realize that we scaled it down or up because we faked it. Or this might preserve it, but if you go like this, it still thinks it's a small cube because the properties inside of it are programmed to remember that it's a small item. So what you have to do is, if you ever manipulate the scale, or if you're rendering something and you say, let's make this edge rounded by 1 inch, and it's coming out too small or too big, and you know realistically that is 1 inch, what you have to do in 3D Max is reset the X form. And to do that, you go to the hammer tool, you click reset X form, you click it again, and it will show up right here, and then that resets its properties. So now it knows this is how big the cube is in world space. Now the most important thing, when you do this, make sure you don't have anything linked to that item because it will break. So observe, I have these elements and I'm going to link them to my cube. Now I take my cube, I modify it, I put it over there, and now see how I move the cube away from here, but the XYZ pivot point is over here. All you have to do is go to the center icon on the hierarchy, click on Effect Pivot Only, and then you can click Center to Object. That centers it to the object. So now, with that said, is we have the cube here, but these items are linked to it. So if you click Reset X Form, so it's good right now. So let's see here. We scale that. So unlink these. We're going to distort it. Link them. See how they blew up? This is what happens. So when you reset X form, make sure you have nothing linked to anything, just for peace of mind. And the awful thing about this is you cannot undo. 3D Max does not allow you to undo from reset X form. So once you're screwed, you're screwed. You blow up your mesh. So always back up your file before resetting an X form. Okay. Now let's see here. There's that. Now, well, this also happens from time to time. You have, let's say, 2 objects, or 1 object with a broken, so right there. Your midpoint is right here. Sometimes what 3D Max will do is, see this little icon for Use Pivot Center? It'll change it to this, and this wants to center it on its own based on what it believes is the center point. So if you know your pivot point is right here and it's moving it in other places, one way you could check is by clicking Effect Pivot Only, and you can see it's here, but as soon as you uncheck it, it will sometimes just snap back to the center of its own. All you have to do is go up here, click and hold, and change it to the very first icon, and that changes it back to the main hero one. So that is going to take care of kind of like the basics, tips and tricks with mesh manipulation. And there's a lot more, but that's kind of like the basics when it comes to like getting your mesh ready and starting to render. So let's see, I'm pressing G for viewport grid. That's how you turn it on and off. So the next thing to go over is UVs. So 3D Max, the way it works is you have your Create tab right here, then you have your Modify tab. This is typically the area you use to ever add any manipulation to your mesh. So the most popular ones for automotive rendering is pretty much edit mesh to tweak things here and there, or UV mapping to add UV coordinates to the car paint bump, so on and so forth. So you want to use UVW map. There's two of them. There's UV map and UVW map. UV map allows you to unwrap your mesh on its own. UVW map allows you to quickly project the UV map. So the way it works is in Material Editor, and I'm just going to pick any random thing. So let's go to Marble. So, oh, this one won't allow it. Gradient, I know it does. Here we go. So right now, if I apply this, I have my gradient. And the problem is this is one of those maps where it doesn't matter about UVs, it just projects it. Oh no, gradient will care. So that's good. Okay, we're good here. So what you want to do is make sure you're always working map channel and map channel. That's always in sync. So let's say I rotate this gradient map. There we go. And see how like whenever I have the mesh selected, it turns on the grid? I hate that feature as well. So under configure, just uncheck that and we're good. Okay, so now map channel, map channel. So if you switch it to 2 over here, but you don't switch it to 2, see how the coordinates don't matter? So you always have to make sure that matches up. And you can use these like as 99. I guess that's the max. So you have quite a bit of map channels to work with per mesh. So that's good. So there's that. That's how you set those up. Let's see what else is there. And you could add as many of these as you want. Thus the map channels. You keep adding them over and over and over. They have spherical, box, all kinds of basic stuff. Nothing too fancy. So there's that. Now, let's see. If you want to, let's see, we're in Corona already. Good. So what I'm going to do is just go to the Create tab, go to the Lights tab, switch it down to Corona, and create an overhead light. Just a sphere will be fine. Put a plane under it. So right now, if you press F10, these are basic, under the Common tab, these are your output settings. So here we have 640 by 480, but if you look in the viewport, it doesn't show it. To allow yourself to see it, hold Shift and press F, and that creates a little crop of what your final output image is. So if you want to change it, you go to like HD TV and do 1920 by 1080. Now to enable RT, all you have to do is click on any viewport, or you could open up the main window. I like to use the top right window. Go to Front, Extended, Corona Interactive. So there it is. There's the sphere. Now I'm going to lower the value of the light. So now that we have that set up, this is how you create alphas for render elements. So you want to do by object or by material ID. So for instance, one we're going to do by object. Every object that you create will always have an object value of 0. So to change that, you just right click on it, go to Object Properties. And here under gbuffer object ID, these are your IDs. So you can change that to 1. And now if we press F9 and do a render, and go to the masking, we get an alpha for the sphere. So I'm going to stop that. There we go. Now let's say you have car paint or whatever you want to do by material. So we're going to apply another sphere to it. Another sphere to that. So we have our object ID, but now you want to break them up. So what you can also do is go to RGB mode, and now click on Material ID. So we're going to go 1, 2, and 3. And where you find that is this little 0 in the Material ID channel. You press and hold, and unfortunately you only have 15 to work with, but here is where you would change it to 1, 2, and 3. Now press F9. So we got our balls, and then our masks, so on and so forth. So you only get 3 channels per render element, 1, 2, and 3. And what you can do then is just keep adding them until you max out 15, or I believe you have 999 object values to play with. So if you want to go by object ID, you have a lot more of these. Oh no, it keeps going. So you can create as many alphas as you want, but that's the technique to do it. Now let's see here. To create Corona materials in general, you just click on the word standard, and then the Corona slot, and Corona material and Corona layered material are the typical things. If you're new to Corona materials, like if you've used V-Ray, this is like V-Ray material, this is like V-Ray blend material. So on and so forth. Now, I do know, unlike some render engines, like for instance, V-Ray, if I make this a full reflective surface, if I want to get it to be decently blurred, where I can still see a little reflection, 0.8 will do it. Corona is a lot more forgiving on value, so 0.8 won't blur as much as V-Ray. So if I really want to diffuse it, I might have to go to 0.6. Now, if you come from my understanding, Mental Ray, they do the same thing. It's very low values to get very low diffuse. So if you're coming from V-Ray, keep an eye on that. Okay, so there's that. Now, let's see here. To load images in your viewport background, there's two options. I believe you could go to configure. I believe you go to configure viewports and background, and then user files, click browse, and then you could load whatever image you want. So for this test, I'm going to load this little grass, and then what you do want to do is click match bitmap. So there's our viewport background. Now, the shortcut to that is hold Alt and press B as in Bob, and that opens up that window. So there's that. Now the last setting I will show to configure is, let's say we go to bitmap and we load this texture on this ball. Now to preview a texture on a material, there's this little icon, show shaded material in viewport. You click that. So if you, for instance, have a high quality texture and it's showing a pretty low res, click on the plus sign, go to configure viewports, and then under I want to say display performance, there we go. Change these things, all of them to 2048. You just do it right away, and this will give you much higher quality texture. So as you can see, keep an eye on this guy. It improves. And this really works with your own custom unique high-res texture. So that's how you get the most out of it. Now, if you want to, let's say if you want to model something real quick in 3D Max, what you can do is create a plane in the front viewport and then apply the texture to it. Now, the way I do it, whenever I would model anything, there's this thing called asset browsing. You click on this and it opens up. And then through here you go to wherever you have any kind of image that you want to model. So here I found a folder of a car wheel. So the way I would start setting this up is I would go to the plane, create a plane tab, make the length and width segments 0, 0. I just right click on this and that maxes it out. Then click on keyboard entry. Select the image which you want to put onto the plane. Right click and go to properties. So it's going to give you these values right here. Now the way it works, and I'm sure it's because of views or something, I don't care to figure it out. The trick is your last number is first, your first number is last. So for length, it's going to be 1881, and for width, it's going to be 1181. Then you click on create, and there it is. And then you just drag it from here and drop it. And there's the image. Create in your viewport, and now I'm going to do Alt B, remove, okay. So there it is. And if you want to scale it, you could do it manually, or you have these options on the bottom. These are the properties of the object. You just type in like 2, and that scales it down to 2% of its natural scale. So that's that. Move it back. There we go. And if you press this little button right here, the zoom extends in all views. But these are things you could find just by exploring 3D Max. I'm not going to get into like every single basics of it. So there's that. Now let's see if I'm missing anything. Okay, so the display, this is cool. I use this feature a lot. So let's say you're lighting a car and you have a light everywhere to, add kickers or whatnot. Now, as you can see, this could get pretty annoying because it's hard to see what your car model is or whatever. So instead of hiding the lights independently, what you could do is go to the display tab and click on the lights checkbox. This hides them. Now what you have to make sure is in Corona, by default they have this checkbox unchecked, render hidden lights. Make sure it's checked. So if you use this feature to hide the lights, make sure it renders the lights. And you can do the same thing for geometry, for shapes, and this right here for shaded, you can actually change it to object color or material color. So if you're looking around the geometry of a CAD model and they have all kinds of materials on them, this is the quick way to just transition it so you don't have to deal with the shading of the model. So there's that. Now let's see what else I could show you. So the other thing is Control I, that's for invert. So let's say this is the wheel, pretend this is the wheel, not the plane. And I move the wheel here, but let's say I want to move it back. The only way to do that is undo. What you can do is if you hold Alt and you right click, this little menu comes up. And you click on Freeze Transform, then you click on Yes when this warning comes up. What this does, it preserves the XYZ coordinates of this object within this object. So you can move it wherever you want, and then all you have to do is right click and go to Transform to 0. Well, hold Alt and right click and then Transform to 0, and it brings it back to its original coordinates. So if you have a car that's rigged and you just have it moving around the environment, or if, let's say your back plate has some turns in it, instead of moving the camera you just want to move the object, that's how you could move the object and then return it back to 0 if you want to. So that's one way of doing it. So then let's see here, there's that. And then if you already know 3D, then this isn't anything new, but you create a physical camera through the tab, and then to change your viewport to the camera, or change your viewport to any viewport in 3D Max, where it says perspective, you click on it, and now you can click on cameras and camera. So there we go. And then when you enable Corona RT, oh, we don't have any lights, so I'm just going to create a light right here. There we go. And I believe the new Corona, because of this, it will use the exposure settings of this camera. Let's see if that's true. Or maybe not. So there we go. So you could use the proper exposure and then just bump up the shutter speed or whatever. But you can figure the exposure stuff out. I don't use the new 3D Max because I hate their new physical camera feature. So that's why I don't upgrade. But if you have the new 3D Max, that's why I did the tutorial in the new 3D Max. But I absolutely despise this camera, so I refuse to upgrade because of it. It's a stupid feature. Okay, and that's that. I think that should cover everything. If you have any questions, let me know, man. I'll be more than happy to help you out.